I swear, if one more thing goes wrong today, I'm done. Harper slammed her car door shut harder than she meant to. Her voice cracked, her knuckles pale from clutching the steering wheel. She had just finished the longest shift of her life. 12 grueling hours at the vet clinic, where an older couple's dog died on the table. The image of their quiet sobs still rang louder than anything else in her mind. All she wanted was to drive home, collapse in bed, and forget this cursed day existed. But life had other plans. The rain had started again, thin needles dancing across the windshield as Harper turned the key. The engine coughed, hesitated, then roared to life. She sighed in relief, put the car in reverse, then froze. A shape darted in front of the headlights, not just a blur. A dog, large, wet, panting. Its ribs visible even through the downpour. "Are you kidding me?" Harper whispered, her forehead falling against the steering wheel. She didn't have the energy for this, not tonight. But the German Shepherd stood completely still now, right at the edge of her driveway. His head tilted slightly, amber eyes widened at wild, not aggressive, just pleading. His front paw hovered off the ground like it hurt to place it down. Harper's stomach twisted. She had seen that look 100 times, and she knew if she drove away now, she would think about that face for weeks, maybe forever. "Fine," she muttered, grabbing the emergency kit from the back seat. "One look, that's it." She opened the car door slowly and stepped into the rain. "Hey buddy," she called gently, keeping her hands visible. The shepherd didn't move, but when she knelt down on one knee, he limped forward, body trembling. Up close, he looked worse. Blood matted behind one ear, old cut scarred over with time. And yet, his eyes held no fear, just a strange, weary kind of trust. "You've been through hell, haven't you?" she whispered. The dog leaned against her, not quite collapsing but close. Harper could feel his body heat through her soaked scrubs. Without thinking, she opened the backseat door. "Come on, it's warm in there. I'll check that paw at home." The shepherd hesitated only a moment before climbing in, groaning as he settled down. Harper started the car again and pulled onto the road. Her heart was already softening against her will. She kept glancing at him in the rearview mirror, watching as he tried to curl his large body into the corner of the seat. Rain streaked the windows, and silence filled the car, save for the soft thump of the wipers. It should have been a moment of calm. But then Harper heard a noise. Not from the dog but something else. A faint whimper. She turned her head sharply. The shepherd's eyes met hers in the mirror. He didn't move, but the sound came again, barely audible, like a kitten or a tiny bird. Confused, Harper slowed the car and pulled into the empty gas station lot. She reached into the back seat to shift the blanket she had laid out beneath the dog and then froze. There, tucked under the shepherd's body, so small she almost didn't see them, were 2 newborn puppies. Harper's breath hitched. Her mind scrambled for logic. "No, no way," she whispered. The dog hadn't growled, hadn't protested. He had protected them, hidden them. He'd made himself look like just another abandoned stray. But he wasn't just injured or lost, he was a father. She knelt on the seat, hands trembling, examining the tiny pups. One was barely moving. The other's eyes were sealed shut, belly rising in tiny jerks. Harper's training kicked in. She adjusted the car's heat, grabbed a clean towel and swaddled the smallest one carefully. The shepherd watched her with an intensity that sent chills through her. "You brought them to me, didn't you?" she whispered, stunned. "You knew." The shepherd nudged her arm with his nose, then laid his head down beside the second pup. Harper sat back in the driver's seat, heart pounding, mind spinning. A sick, protective dog, 2 tiny pups, and she, the girl who had just sworn the world had broken her, was now the only one who could save them. The drive home felt longer than it should have. Her headlights pierced the darkness like weak flashlights, but Harper barely noticed the road. She was listening, counting every soft breath in the back seat, hoping they would keep going. When she pulled into her driveway, she didn't rush. She moved with quiet urgency, carrying the pups and helping the shepherd out of the car. She led them inside her tiny bungalow, cleared the couch in seconds, and began the triage: warm water, heating pad, gloves. Her hands moved from muscle memory, but her soul felt raw, awakened, like some old wound in her had split open and was breathing again. That night, Harper didn't sleep. The rain kept falling outside, but in her living room, wrapped in layers of warmth, a broken dog and his 2 helpless pups lay curled together, and Harper sat beside them on the floor, one hand resting gently on the shepherd's back. Her eyes red, not from exhaustion, but from something deeper. She didn't know who had abandoned them, where they had come from, or how long they had been out there in the storm. But something told her this wasn't random. This dog didn't just find a dot, he chose her. Harper sat still on the living room floor, her hand resting gently on the German shepherd's fur. The weight of the moment hadn't left her, it had only deepened. The quiet rise and fall of the pups' bellies, the soft whimper they let out every few minutes, the dog's unblinking gaze. It was all too much and somehow not enough. The old blanket she had pulled from her linen closet was already damp from his fur, but he didn't seem to care. He had positioned himself like a sentry, curled protectively around his newborns, chest barely rising, but still alert like a soldier too tired to sleep. Harper couldn't stop watching him. There was a gravity to the animal she couldn't name, something ancient and aching. She had treated hundreds of dogs in her time, but never had one looked at her like this one did, like he understood. Like he had brought her not a burden, but a secret he could no longer carry alone at some point. She stood up, moving quietly to prepare a saline flush. The smaller of the two pups was struggling, chest stuttering in uneven pulses. She held it close to her skin to warm it further, her heart beat loud in her ears. She kept thinking, this shouldn't be happening in my living room, not after today, not after everything. And yet, there was no panic. Just an unbearable focus, like the world had shrunk to this couch. These puppies, this dog. As the sky began to lighten, she finally stood, bones stiff, knees sore. She made herself a cup of tea she didn't drink and walked outside to breathe. The front lawn was soaked, the sky still moody with leftover clouds. The storm had passed, but her life felt rearranged as if something fundamental had shifted. And she couldn't quite find the before anymore. She returned inside just in time to see the shepherd struggle to his feet. He didn't bark. He simply walked to the front door and looked back at her. Harper blinked. "What? Where are you going?" she asked quietly, heart already clenching. The dog stood, waiting. She followed. She stepped into the dewy grass and watched as he began limping across the yard. Slowly, purposefully. She grabbed a flashlight, threw on a hoodie, and followed him barefoot. They passed the edge of her property, slipped into the woods that bordered the old farm trail. Harper had walked this path 100 times with her childhood dog, years ago, but this felt different. This was something else. He didn't go far. Just past the cluster of cedar trees, he stopped at a shallow ditch. Harper's flashlight caught the glint of something metal. She knelt down, heart pounding, a license plate. Half buried, covered in mud and pine needles. Confused, she brushed at the debris, the remnants of a van, burned out, rusted, long abandoned. The shepherd stood silently beside her, tail still, head bowed. Harper rose slowly, eyes flicking between the wreck and the dog. Her breath fogged in the cold morning air. "This was yours, wasn't it?" she whispered. "Your family." He didn't respond, of course, but the silence was louder than any sound. Harper stepped closer, scanning the interior. Most of it was decayed, charred and collapsed inward, but she could still see the faint outlines: an empty baby seat, a scorched thermos, the ghost of a life that ended here. She turned back toward the shepherd. "You've been guarding this," she said, voice barely audible. He limped toward the edge of the wreckage and lay down. Harper's throat burned. The implications began to crash into her one after another. He hadn't just appeared on her driveway. He had followed her. He had chosen her. But not just because he was hurt. He had lost someone here, maybe everyone, and somehow, some primal, ancient part of him had recognized something in her. Maybe the exhaustion in her bones. Maybe the grief she hadn't yet named. Maybe just kindness. Back at the house, the puppies whimpered again, faint but alive. Harper scooped the shepherd's massive head in her arms and whispered into his fur, "I'll keep them safe. I swear to you." The dog looked up at her, and in that fragile moment, his eyes softened, not with trust, but something deeper. Relief. Harper stood, wiped her eyes roughly, and walked back with him. The sun was beginning to rise now, painting the sky with colors she hadn't noticed in months: orange, violet, faint gold. For the first time in what felt like years, she didn't feel like running from the day. Inside, the smallest pup had curled into the nook of the blanket, tiny breaths steady. Harper reached down and ran a finger gently across its back. The shepherd curled up beside them, groaning softly, and rested his head down like he'd carried a weight too heavy for too long, and now, at last, could rest. Harper sat beside him, again, knees tucked to her chest, and whispered into the quiet, "You didn't just bring them to me. You brought me back to myself." She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Vet bills, maybe heartbreak, maybe new beginnings, but in that stillness, surrounded by damp blankets, soft breathing, and silent promises, she realized something extraordinary. The most unbelievable thing in her backseat that night wasn't the puppies, it was hope. The house felt like a sanctuary. Now, though only days ago, it had been little more than a resting place between Harper's shifts, an empty shell she moved through without truly seeing. But now, every corner held life. The smell of warm towels, the faint wheeze of the humidifier, the rhythmic sound of newborn breath. It wasn't quiet anymore, not really, but the sounds that filled it weren't noise. They were reminders that something had survived, that something was still fighting. Harper had called in sick to the clinic that morning. She didn't even bother to explain. Just a raspy voicemail and a clipped "I'll be in touch." She knew they'd manage without her, and even if they didn't, she couldn't leave. Not yet. The German shepherd whom she'd begun to call Boone. After a story her grandfather used to tell about a loyal mountain dog had taken up residence beside the living room heater. He barely moved except to shift closer to his pups. Harper tried to coax him into eating, but his appetite was weak. His eyes, however, followed her constantly, as if afraid she'd disappear if he blinked. The pups had stabilized somewhat, but they were fragile. Every hour counted. Every feeding was a battle between instinct and survival. Harper barely slept. She moved between heating pads and bottle feedings, wiping tiny mouths, checking temperatures. Boone watched every move, and sometimes, when her hands trembled from exhaustion, he would nuzzle her arm, as if offering what strength he had left. 3 days passed this way, then 4. The house began to smell like boiled rice, antiseptic, and dog fur, but Harper didn't mind. Not once, and then the knock came. It was late, almost midnight. Harper froze midnight, heart kicking against her ribs. Boone growled low in his throat, not loud but deep enough to stir the pups. Harper gently placed a towel over them and approached the door, barefoot, heart pounding. She peeked through the window. A man stood on the porch, backlit by her porch light. Tall, mud-streaked jeans, a red flannel shirt. He wasn't moving, just standing, one hand resting on the porch rail. His face was turned away slightly, but something about his stillness made her stomach twist. Harper opened the door only part way. "Can I help you?" He looked up slowly, and his eyes, tired, sunken, but strangely soft, met hers. "I'm sorry to come so late," he said. "I'm looking for a dog." Her mouth went dry. She didn't answer. He rubbed his forehead. "German Shepherd male, been missing a while. I heard someone saw one limping down the county road. That someone might have brought him here." Harper didn't respond immediately. She studied him closely, his boots caked in dried mud, the dark circles beneath his eyes. He didn't look dangerous, just weathered, hollowed out. "You knew the dog?" she asked finally. "I raised him," the man said. Boone. At the sound of the name, Harper felt her lungs stop working for a second. "I thought he was dead," the man continued. "There was a fire. A lot of things got lost." Harper hesitated, fingers tightening on the doorframe. "There were pups with him." The man nodded to his mate. "She didn't make it. She was sick after the accident. We were trying to get them to help, but the van stalled. I went out looking for gas. When I came back," he swallowed hard. "Fire had spread from the trees. I couldn't get to them. Thought he was gone. I've been looking ever since." Harper stepped out onto the porch, heart racing with a strange mix of suspicion and something else. Boone hadn't flinched around her, hadn't panicked, but still, she had to be sure. "He didn't come to the road," she said. "He came to me, sat on my driveway, let me bring him inside, carried the pups with him." The man's voice cracked. "That's him. That's Boone. He always knew where to go." A silence passed between them, heavy and unsure. Boone hadn't come to the door. He was still inside, likely listening. Harper didn't know what she was supposed to feel. Relief, gratitude, maybe even grief. Boone had become more than a stray. He had become hers. She stepped aside. "Come in, but be gentle." The man removed his boots at the door, walked slowly into the living room. The moment Boone saw him, he tensed but didn't move. He stared. Long still, the man sank to his knees. "Hey boy," he whispered. "I'm sorry." Boone's tail didn't wag. His body didn't shift. But after a long pause, he leaned forward and placed his head in the man's lap. Harper felt something loosen in her chest, some knot she hadn't known was there. The pups squeaked softly from their bundle of towels, and the man turned toward them with wide, reverent eyes. "You saved them," he said, looking at Harper now. "He brought them to the right person." She nodded, throat tight. "They're not out of the woods yet." He looked at her, truly looked. "Neither is he, neither are you. I think." Harper sat down across from him. "No, but we trying that night. She didn't sleep either." But she wasn't alone in it. Boone lay between them, the man on one side, Harper on the other. They didn't talk much, just listened to the breathing, the wind outside, the whisper of life that had returned to her home and somehow to her heart. The twist wasn't that Boone had a past, it was that Harper did too, and somewhere in this unlikely rescue, their broken pieces had found a strange way to fit the fourth. Morning broke in a wash of dull gray, clouds still hanging low like a breath held too long. Harper hadn't slept much. The couch creaked beneath her as she shifted to check the smallest pup again, its tiny ribcage rising in fragile rhythm. The room was warm, quiet, alive. Boone lay curled nearby, his eyes closed but ears twitching slightly with every sound. Harper had grown used to the constant state of alertness, hers and his. There was something sacred about this waiting, as if time itself had slowed to make space for survival. She moved gently, cradling the pup in one hand, whispering nonsense to keep herself grounded. But her hands froze when she heard the sound again. Not a knock, not footsteps, a slow crunch of gravel outside the house. Her heart stuttered. She placed the pup back in the nest of blankets and stood quickly, crossing to the window without drawing attention to herself. A dark SUV sat idling just beyond the gate. Tinted windows, engine humming low like a threat. No one got out. She waited, breath thin. Boone raised his head now, alert but silent, golden eyes flicking to the door. Harper didn't move, didn't blink. Then, just as suddenly, the engine cut off. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. A man stepped out, mid-40s, stocky build, pressed jacket, to clean for the muddy road he stood on. He wasn't lost. He wasn't curious. He was looking for something, or someone. Harper felt her stomach clench. Boone stood slowly and moved to her side. His body didn't shake, but something in his posture was unmistakable. Recognition, not joy, not relief, just memory and a flicker of unease. Harper whispered, "You know him, don't you?" Boone didn't respond. but his body had gone tense. The man walked to the gate, looked around, then opened it himself and strode up the short gravel path as if he owned it. Harper unlocked the door but didn't open it. She waited, one hand on the knob, heart rattling in her chest. A knock, calm, measured dot. She opened the door halfway. "Can I help you?" The man smiled, who practiced. "I hope so. I'm with Weston Ridge Security. A client of ours lost a trained dog several weeks ago. We traced the chip signal to this general area. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions?" Harper didn't move. "There's no dog chip here, at least not one that's pinging I would have scanned." The man's smile didn't falter. "It's likely buried under scar tissue. Some of our canines are military grade. The signal's inconsistent, but it led us close enough." Harper felt a chill crawl down her spine. "You're saying this is your dog?" "He's not mine personally, but yes. He was part of a private program. Obedience training. Search and protection. He wasn't meant to be out on his own. Dangerous if cornered. Our client has concerns." Harper looked back at Boone. He had not moved. His eyes were locked on the man, silent, assessing. He walked 3 miles through a thunderstorm, carrying 2 puppies, she said. "Let himself into my car and collapsed. Protected them with his life. Does that sound dangerous to you?" The man exhaled sharply. "Ma'am, I'm not here to argue. I'm here to recover company property." Property. That single word ignited something deep and molten in her chest. "You left him. Whatever fire or wreckage he came from, he survived it. You weren't looking for him. You were hiding him. Whatever he escaped from, he wasn't just lost, was he?" The man's expression tightened. "Be careful what you assume. You don't know the full story. And you don't know him," she snapped. Boone stepped forward now, slowly, deliberately, placing himself between her and the doorway. His body remained calm, but his stare was locked on the man like a boundary had just been drawn. The man took 1 step back. "We can come back with a warrant." "Try it," Harper said. "But you'll need a court order and a veterinary affidavit, proving you have legal ownership, and I promise you, that dog's been through enough. You touch him and I'll have the entire county vet board on your neck before sundown." The man's expression hardened. He stared at Boone for a long second, then turned. "You're making a mistake," he muttered before walking back toward the SUV. Harper watched him go, pulse thundering in her ears. The tires spat gravel as the SUV reversed out and disappeared down the bend. Only when the sound had fully faded did Harper turn back toward Boone. He stood still, not panting, not anxious, just watching the road. She knelt down and wrapped her arms around his neck. "Whatever they wanted from you, they're not getting it back. You're home now." That night, Harper sat beside the couch again. The pups nestled in a box by the heater. Boone stretched protectively in front of them. She thought of how quickly love had formed here. Not the soft fairy tale kind. The real kind, the one born of grief, of loyalty, of pain shared and endured. Boone hadn't chosen her out of convenience. He had chosen her because she had something he needed. Not just safety but witnessing, someone to say, "I see you, I believe you, you matter." And in saving him, in shielding his tiny, trembling legacy, Harper had stumbled into something she hadn't realized she'd been looking for. A reason to stay, a reason to fight, and most of all, a reason to begin again. Harper woke to silence, not the comforting hush of sleeping puppies or the steady rhythm of Boone's breathing, but a stillness that felt wrong, the kind that pressed against the walls and made the air feel thick. Her heart jolted before her mind caught up. She threw the blanket aside and rushed to the living room, bare feet cold against the floor. The puppy box was still warm. The tiniest one, whom she had secretly named Cricket, was moving, weak but alive. Boone, however, was gone. Panic bloomed instantly, sharp and breathless. She called his name once, then again louder. No sound answered. She unlocked the door, heart in her throat, and stepped outside into the pale morning. Frost kissed the edges of the grass. A soft mist clung to the trees beyond the yard. Harper's eyes scanned the landscape until she saw a movement near the woods. Just past the old cedar line, Boone stood at the edge of the trees, motionless. His ears flicked when she called again, but he didn't turn. She ran to him, breath-catching, from the cold boots half-laced and jacket thrown over pajamas. When she reached him, she noticed his body was stiff, every muscle tense, like he was holding himself together with nothing but instinct. His eyes weren't on her. They were fixed on something deeper in the woods. Then she saw it, another figure, crouched, watching a woman. Harper froze, heart hammering. The woman stood slowly, hands raised. She was thin, emaciated, even her coat torn, shoes soaked through. Her eyes were sunken but not empty. They locked onto Boone first, then onto Harper. "I'm sorry," she said, voice shaking. "I didn't mean to scare you." Boone didn't move. Harper placed a hand on his back, grounding herself. "Who are you?" The woman took a breath. "I'm the one who left him. The van, the fire, ... I was there. I couldn't go back. I thought he'd died with the others." Harper's blood ran cold. "You were driving the van," she nodded. "It wasn't mine. We were hiding. My husband worked for those people, the ones who came to your door. Boone wasn't a pet. He was property, but he chose us anyway. Chose to protect my daughter." Her voice broke on that word. When the van caught fire, I got out with her, or I thought I did, but I couldn't find her. My husband took off, said we had to run, that if they found out what happened, they'd kill us both. Harper's throat tightened. You left Boone behind. The woman nodded slowly, eyes wet. I didn't mean to. I thought he was gone, but he stayed. He must have found the pups afterward, buried them in the blankets, guarded them. Her gaze dropped. That's what he does. He guards things he loves. Harper didn't know what to say. Her mind raced, trying to stitch together what felt like a fractured dream. This woman was a ghost, a remnant of the trauma Boone had carried. She had fled, survived, and somehow found her way back to him. One came because I saw the car, the woman continued. Boone used to sit beside me in the passenger seat, and when I passed the road and saw your car in the drive, I don't know why, I just felt it, like he was near. Boone finally moved, not toward her but beside Harper, brushing her thigh with his flank. His stance softened, not fully relaxed but no longer defensive. Harper looked down at him and then back at the woman. Where's your daughter now? She asked, the words cautious, heavy. The woman's eyes darkened. Gone. I think she died in the fire, or in the smoke. I never found her, just ashes. And I think Boone kept looking for her. Maybe he thought he could bring something back. Harper exhaled slowly. He did. The puppies. The woman choked on a sound half sob, half breath. That was her dog, you know. He was supposed to protect her. He did, Harper said quietly. And now he's protecting them. A long silence fell between them. Harper could feel Boone pressing closer, not from fear but from familiarity, from memory. His body vibrated with emotion he didn't know how to express. Harper understood. She knelt beside him and scratched gently behind his ear. I don't know what you want from him, she said finally, looking up at the woman. But he's not going back to wherever he came from. He's not property, not anymore. The woman shook her head. I don't want to take him. I needed to see he was okay. That something survived from that night. He's more than okay, Harper said. He's a father now. Tears streamed freely down the woman's cheeks. Thank you for taking him in, for not turning him away. Harper stood slowly. You should come in, warm up, at least eat something. But the woman shook her head. No, I won't bring more eyes to your door. The men looking for him, they won't stop. If they know he's alive, they'll come back. Harper's jaw clenched. Let them try. The woman gave her a long, searching look, then reached into her coat and pulled out a thin metal tag. This was his. I dug it out of the wreck before I ran. I couldn't keep it, but maybe you should have it now. Harper took it, the cold metal heavy in her palm, a string of letters and numbers and one word, barely visible beneath the scratches. Guardian. That evening, as dusk settled over the cabin and the trees whispered with the breath of approaching winter, Harper sat beside Boone with the tag on the table beside her. The pups slept quietly, their tiny bodies warm and safe. Boone rested his head on her lap, his breathing even. Whatever he had lost in that fire, whatever pain he had carried through storm and ash, he had found his way to something new, not perfect, not painless, but whole. And in saving them, Harper, the pups, and even the shattered woman in the woods, he had done what he was born to do. He had guarded what mattered. A week passed, and everything in Harper's world felt both unrecognizable and more real than ever. The days fell into a rhythm, the kind that wasn't planned but earned through effort, through sleepless nights, and through the slow repair of things that had once been broken without anyone noticing. The pups, now named Cricket and Moss, had opened their eyes, and though their legs still trembled when they tried to stand, their will was unmistakable. Every day brought more strength, more curiosity, and the promise of survival. Boone rarely left their side. He had accepted the warmth of Harper's home with quiet grace, but he still moved with the caution of something that had known hunger, abandonment, and fire. And yet, there were moments, fleeting sacred ones, when he seemed to remember what it was to be safe. He would curl at Harper's feet while she worked, let out a contented sigh when she rubbed his shoulders, and, once in a while, he would fall asleep with one paw resting gently over his pups, like a sentinel finally at ease. The metal tag, one the woman had left, now hung above the fireplace. Harper couldn't bring herself to treat it like a relic. It was a reminder, not just of Boone's past, but of how far he had come, of what he had carried, what he had chosen to carry. She didn't know what had happened to the woman after that morning in the woods. She never came back, never left a message, but Harper knew she had been telling the truth. Some stories aren't tied up neatly. Some people disappear quietly because that's all they know how to do. But Boone had stayed, and Harper, once drifting between long hours and empty rooms, had stayed too. The knot came again 10 days later, but this time it wasn't in the middle of the night, and it wasn't a stranger. It was Dr. Keller, her mentor from the clinic, holding a carrier of supplies and a small smile that Harper hadn't seen in years. "Who disappeared?" he said, stepping inside. "The nurses started a betting pool on whether you were off chasing wolves in the Rockies." Harper laughed, really laughed, and shook her head. "Not wolves, just life." Dr. Keller set the carrier down and crouched to examine the pups. His eyes widened. "They're strong. You saved them." Harper nodded. but didn't speak. Her gaze shifted to Boone, who stood protectively nearby. Dr. Keller followed her eyes and sat back on his heels. "That's the dog, huh, Boone?" she said quietly. "He's the one who saved all of us." Keller watched him for a long time. "There's something different in him. He's seen more than most people ever will," she said. The vet reached out slowly, and Boone allowed him to stroke the top of his head. "So what happens now?" he asked gently. Harper didn't answer immediately. She looked around her living room, the couch covered in blankets, the floor littered with chew toys, medical journals, and the soft hum of an old radio playing low. It wasn't orderly. It wasn't polished, but it was theirs. "I don't know," she said, "but I'm not rushing any of it." That night, as the fire cracked softly in the hearth and the wind stirred the branches outside, Harper stood at the window, watching the stars blink into view. Boone lay behind her, the pups nestled between his front paws. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, and for the first time in her life, that thought didn't terrify her, because today's exact moment was enough. There was no headline to wrap this story in, no dramatic climax, no courtroom scene, no reunion with a tearful owner. Just a dog who had carried life through fire and rain, a woman who had made space for that life in her home and heart, and the quiet, breathtaking truth that healing rarely comes in the form of miracles. It comes in small, consistent acts of love. Before turning in for the night, Harper reached up to touch the metal tag one last time. The word etched into it had faded slightly, worn by time and memory, but it was still there. Guardian, she understood now. He wasn't just a protector of lives. He was a keeper of stories of loss and loyalty, of love that survived things it was never meant to endure. And in saving his, she had salvaged something of her own. The world outside moved on, unaware. But inside the little house, a pact had been made, not in words but in presence, in staying, in choosing to begin again. And sometimes, that's more than enough.